All right, good evening. You have reached the Evergreen State College Tacoma campus virtual lecture series. This is spring quarter 2021. We welcome all of you. We see more and more people coming. You are welcome. Tonight, we have a special treat for you. We have been honored with having an author in residence at Evergreen Tacoma. And tonight we are going to hear from our own author in residence, Teresa Stovall. I'd like to introduce her at this time. Teresa Stovall is a noted author, award-winning journalist, blogger, and identity Oh, sorry. And I thought I was being muted. I'm sorry. An identity equity advocate whose work to contribute to a more just society. She is honored to be serving as the current author in residence for the Evergreen State College Tacoma campus, her alma mater. And this is where she earned her BA degree in communications. Teresa was born a jazz baby in Seattle, Washington, when much of the country was racially segregated, and her parents' marriage was illegal in 16 states. Her new memoir, Swirl Girl, Coming of Race in the USA, reveals how she grew up as a Black Power flower child who battled society and sometimes her closest loved ones to forge her identity on her own terms. Swirl Girl was published by the independent Black company Alchemy Media Publishing and is available on TaRessaStovall.com and Amazon.com. An author from the age of 7, Teresa has written and published poems, books, and plays on various topics, including racial identity and the impact of colorism on people of color. Her books include A Love Supreme, Real Life Stories of Black Love, Portraits of 20 Couples, a foreword by Ruby D, and featuring, I should say, me and my family in chapter 1. The Hotspot, a novel. The Buffalo Soldiers, a children's book. She has also co-edited anthologies with Tracy Price Thompson, including Proverbs for the People, an anthology of contemporary African American stories. Other People's Skin, 4 novellas, a groundbreaking anthology about hearing from colorism. Teresa's writing has been featured in USA Weekend, the Courier Post, the Montclair, New Jersey Times, the Defender Online, the NAACP Crisis, Culture.USA, among several other platforms. Without further ado, I give to you, Teresa Stovall. Good evening, Teresa.
Good evening, Dean Dr. Marcia Tatarunga. Hello, everybody. I see so many faces and names. I'm already getting teary. Hey, Bobby. My niece Kelly is here with her backdrop of my book cover. Hey, Kelly. Love the PR. Hello to everybody. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here. So, I want to share with you some excerpts from my book, Swirl Girl, Coming of Race in the USA. And I want to share, this is really a special sharing, and it's a special sharing because this is a family reunion tonight. I might even cry, mess up my makeup, whatever, just flow with it. This is really a family reunion. Like, some of the people I'm going to talk about and read you what I wrote about them are here tonight. And interestingly, this is a series of 4 lectures. We've already had 2. The first from the esteemed Dr. Joy Hardiman, the second from the amazing Elmer Dixon, and next week will be the phenomenal Larry Gossett. And all 3 of these people are stars in the story that I'm going to be sharing tonight, along with some other folks who you may know. And so the topic, the course that I'm working with Dean Tatarunga on and really the essence of the Evergreen State College Tacoma program is community. So community is always the theme, right? And this quarter we're working on connecting the dots. And so inspired by the idea of community and connecting the dots, I wanted to share parts of my story and excerpts of Swirl Girl, and the people who helped me connect my dots as I was growing up, as I was coming of race and coming of age, and mostly in Seattle, Washington, and who helped me become who I am, and to have a strong sense of identity and purpose in life. These people are very, very precious to me, and I'm thrilled that they are all still with us. And so I want this is a praise song. I want to pay tribute. I want to give them their flowers, and just share a little bit. Okay. So see, these are the people who help me navigate the treacherous waters of racial identity. Um, and my guiding theme is the community is the best solution to mixed race identity confusion. And you all know this, mixed race people, and especially mixed Black people in the United States, Black and whatever else, are often assumed to be confused about our identities. But I believe that when you grow up in a community that reflects and affirms and encourages you, then you can develop a strong sense of self and a strong sense of purpose. I was blessed to be able to do that. And so the work I do now is endeavoring to share that with other folks and other folks who are mixed, and to help them do the same, because I've been blessed. I want to pass the blessings on. So, you may have heard or be aware of, tragic mulatto. And even today, especially when someone's Black and white, they're often presumed to be confused and have lives of rejection and sorrow. And it's interesting because there can be challenges, and some of the challenges that feed the stereotypes are real, and a lot of people struggle with them. I believe that one reason people struggle with them is that when you're not rooted in a community that nurtures you and builds you up and invests in you, then it can be difficult. I mean, race/racism is inherently difficult, problematic, painful, and difficult. So without further ado, I want to share some of the stars of my life story with you and the people to whom I owe so much. So my parents were born, my parents grew up together. Black dad, Jewish mom. Okay, my mother was first generation American born, Russian Jewish parents. My father, African American, with hefty doses of indigenous Native American and some European ancestry. They grew up together, and this is really important, side by side in North Minneapolis, in the hood, where both Black people and Jewish people were redlined. This is the 1920s, 1930s, which means that's where they were allowed to live. Black people and Jewish people lived together in North Minneapolis partially because both groups were shut out from other parts of the city. Their shared status as marginalized people on the low end of the socioeconomic ladder created a sense of camaraderie which enabled them to coexist in relative harmony. As my mother Rosalind hit puberty, she became smitten with her older brother's best friend, a handsome Negro named George Stone, nicknamed Kelly. He was an accomplished tap dancer with beguiling eyes, a one-sided smile, and more than his fair share of charisma and charm. They grew up, went their separate ways, and reconnected as adults in California. Kelly might not have remembered young Rosalind, but he was drawn to the classy beauty with the regal cheekbones, trim hourglass figure, and subtly seductive smile. They shared a love of good jazz, dancing, and fashionable attire. Kelly sported the dramatic zoot suits favored by Black, Latino, and Italian men and jazz musicians who wore them as hip badges of cultural pride. Rosalind stayed equally sharp with her sleek Black pompadour hairstyle, chic fashions, and flawlessly coordinated accessories. Rosalind turned down several devoted, wealthy white suitors because she stubbornly believed that her romantic destiny was with Kelly Stone. He had given up dancing for drumming. They landed in Seattle in the late late 1940s, a place for people seeking fresh starts and new horizons. Washington state didn't have any laws against interracial marriage, though attempts had been made years earlier. The tolerant atmosphere drew many people who found love across the color line. While it wasn't as high profile as Harlem, Chicago, or other well known jazz cities, Seattle had a vibrant jazz scene. The heartbeat of this scene was in the Central District, just east of downtown, where redlining allowed most Black people to reside. This scene nurtured the early careers of Quincy Jones, Ray Charles, Ernestine Anderson, and many others. My dad was part of this scene, though he never became famous. The sizzling bohemian atmosphere was the perfect backdrop for couples like my parents. Many of Seattle's Black jazz musicians dated white women. My mother seemed to be the only Jewish one. Footnote, back then Jews were not yet considered white. And they formed a tight community, buying homes near each other in the Central District. The women in these controversial marriages left nothing to chance. In the days, this is the 1950s, before birth control and reproductive choice, my mother and her friends strategically planned their pregnancies so their little mixed children would have friends their age and a sense of community among families who looked like theirs. We grew up, we jazz babies, firmly rooted in this unusual neighborhood. Being jazz babies gave our mixedness a sense of normalcy. In our small, controlled environment, we were the rule rather than the exception. This knowledge fortified us when we stepped into the wider world where most families didn't look like ours. As I grew, I encountered people's questions, assumptions, and biases about my identity. I became aware of society's mixed messages and contradictions about race in general and me in particular. But because of my grounding in that home community, I never internalized these issues or believed that there was anything wrong with me or with what I was. The first person to impact my sense of identity was my mother, Rosalind Stone. My parents were divorced when I was very young. After my younger brother was born, my mother's siblings encouraged her to mask our racial identities. Once they saw that my little brother Greg was almost as light skinned and racially ambiguous looking as me, they suggested that she move us to Hawaii, where she could raise us as vaguely blended without the pesky complications of that Negro stuff. They even offered her financial assistance to help start a new life. But she wasn't tempted. I knew we might struggle financially, but I couldn't lie to my children, she told me. You have to live your truth so you can face yourself in the mirror. Being mixed is nothing to hide or be ashamed of. Mom had left Minneapolis. When mom had left Minneapolis for California as a teen, her elegant beauty attracted job offers. She was often encouraged to change her name from Weisberg to something less ethnic. Some would-be employers even offered to help her get her nose fixed. She told them, no, thank you, and walked away from those opportunities, keeping her name, her nose, and her integrity intact. My mother was my first role model. Let me share a few others. Fast forward to the summer of 1968. I'm 13 years old, eighth grade, coming out of eighth grade. It was a defining season for the whole country. Hostilities were still brewing, even in Seattle, from the anguish of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Young people were noisily protesting the Vietnam War and the draft that forced young men into service. Some white women ripped off their bras to burn in the name of women's liberation. The civil rights movement, which had pushed the government to change segregation laws, gave way to the brasher Black Power movement of the North, which demanded respect and equality without apology or compromise. So I was hanging out with my girlfriend Dawn one August day, speculating about our upcoming ninth grade school year. We practiced the latest dance steps, played with makeup, and did our hair till we were bored. Then Dawn suggested we go hang out with her cousins. I agreed, not sure who these mysterious cousins might be. Dawn didn't give any clues as we walked south to the corner of 23rd and Union, then turned east and walked up the hill to 34th Avenue into the Madrona neighborhood. Finally, we arrived at a plain-faced storefront. I followed Dawn inside, then stopped short, captivated by a room full of beautiful young Black men and women in black pants and powder blue shirts, many with black berets perched on their afros. I wondered what alternate universe we had stepped into. Dawn was welcomed with hugs and smiles by two tall, thin young men with towering afros and an air of authority. She introduced them as her cousins, Elmer and Aaron Dixon. I stared at them, unable to form a coherent response. Hello, sister, the one with the green eyes said. The brown eyed one smiled down at me, gestured toward a worn sofa, and invited us to have a seat. Sister? I plopped onto the sofa, breathless and giddy. Those two syllables were the sweetest I'd heard in a long time. I felt embraced, welcomed, and best of all, understood. I learned that we were in the headquarters of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, the first party chapter outside the state of California. The Panthers included us in political education classes, gave us books to read, and focused on serving the community with free food and health care. They broke down oppression and equality along economic, not racial lines when they were talking to us. And they explained the inherent class inequities of capitalism in a way that put the world around me into clear perspective. The Panthers were always polite, respectful, and taking care of business. And they treated us like equals with brains. This was so much better than middle school. This was life. The Dixon brothers and the Panther Party were good for my shaky adolescent confidence. They treated me like I was intelligent, capable, and caring. Inspired by their example of grassroots activism through service, I felt a growing sense of purpose and the power of being part of a cause. At 13 years old, this was powerful stuff. So, my thanks to Elmer Dixon, Aaron Dixon, my friend whose real name is Karen Nelson Davis, that's Dawn, and the Black Panther Party of Seattle, Washington. Fast forward, 1972, getting out of high school after years of involuntarily integrating Seattle's whitest North End schools, I graduated with dreams of being a writer. I took an office job with the Central Area School Council to pay the bills. Nobody on either side of my family had gone to college, and though I'd been designated a gifted student when I was little and skipped a grade, no one had ever mentioned higher education to me. So I'm at this office job, 18 years old. I raced through all of my clerical work, then used a typewriter to pound out long, semi-coherent rants about being mixed and wanting the world to meet me on my own terms. The chair of the board of directors of the council was a bespectacled young man named Larry Gossett. He'd been an activist with the Dixon brothers, helping to found the Seattle Panther Party and Black student unions in several local and middle and high schools. By this time, he was recruiting, inner city students to the Equal Opportunity Program at the University of Washington called the UW. Why aren't you in college? He'd always ask me. I explained that I didn't need college to be a writer. What do you write? Mostly things about being mulatto, I said proudly. Mulatto? He looked surprised. That's what you call yourself? That's what I am. You know that means you're Black, right? We argued passionately day after day, and I started looking forward to our debates. Larry always finished by saying, you've got to stop wasting your brains and go to school. I wasn't interested. I didn't have the grades coming out of high school, and we didn't have the money. One day, Larry, who would not give up, issued a challenge, promising me that if I just filled out the paperwork, he'd get me into the UW with financial aid. I couldn't believe it when I was admitted to the University of Washington, where, inspired by the blaxploitation movie Superfly, I decided to become a filmmaker. So that is my thank you to Larry Gossett, who, of course, tricked or beguiled many thousands of people into school who might not have gone otherwise, and changed countless lives in the process. The other cool thing about Larry was that during the college years, when you needed a quick summer job, he would hire you. And that was one of the places I got to meet Dean Marcia Tater-Runga when we were both much younger, and we got to be colleagues at the Central Area Motivation Program, which is another peak experience. So also, something else that happened at the University of Washington that changed my life. So I want to share that. And I joined the Third World Coalition at the University of Washington. One leader of the coalition was Rhonda Oden, a charismatic Creole girl with a passion for progressive politics. She spoke softly but eloquently about justice, equality, and building solidarity to work for change. When Rhonda said that she was publishing an anthology of writing, I asked what she was looking for. Something dynamic, something that represents you, she said with an encouraging smile. I could barely wait to start writing. I wrote my first identity poem, Twilight Child. It was long, it was complicated, and I was terrified about submitting it to Rhonda for the anthology. I'd never been so scared to show anyone one of my poems before. This was the rawest, most naked thing I'd ever written. I didn't think anybody was ready for this level of truth. Once I handed my masterpiece to Rhonda, I lost sleep, worrying about whether I'd be criticized, ostracized, thrown out of the Third World Coalition for being too confrontational. I was one big knot of anxiety until she came to me with a big smile and told me how much she liked the poem. I hugged her and floated on air for a few hours. Then I started worrying about how other people would react. I considered skipping classes or coming to campus in disguise. I was shocked when other poets from the anthology congratulated me. Some even said that my poem would help them to see mixed people differently. Classmates I'd never really spoken to thanked me for opening their minds. I was euphoric. There was nothing better than feeling like my words could reach people and help us all understand each other a little better. Cool ending to the story. Rhonda Oden and Larry Gossett were married not long after, and they're still together. So, one of my favorite couples, a great love story for the ages and certainly for the community. But I knew them before they knew each other. Haha. All right, so now we're fast forwarding. So I wanted to be a filmmaker. I'm going to the UW. I do 2 years there, but the University of Washington didn't really offer hands-on equipment and opportunities, which you needed to become a filmmaker. It was the kind of course where you needed to, be able to pick up a camera. Back then they were big, you know, huge lumbering things, but you needed to get your hands on equipment and be able to work. Now, of course, you can make feature films in your phone, but it wasn't like that back in the olden days. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to major in film, but the University of Washington wasn't giving me the opportunity. I had a wonderful family friend named Ed Samuelson, a white man who was my brother Greg's big brother in the Big Sister, Big Brother program. And he'd become part of our family. He was a very sharp guy. He ran the Seattle Mental Health Institute, just brilliant. And I shared my frustrations with him, and he told me about this strange place called the Evergreen State College, which was still pretty new. And he said he heard they had a cool new film program. So I applied to Evergreen and I was accepted. The summer before I started at Evergreen, I met another life changer, Evergreen professor Joy Hardiman, an enchanting Black dynamo with proud features, natural hair, and the most confident stride I'd ever seen. Joy was like a personal trainer for my brain. She introduced me to books, theater, and ideas that expanded my sense of possibility for myself and for my community. I scooped up her countless gems of wisdom as she quickly dropped them and adopted her as my mentor. So I entered Evergreen under her guidance, even though the film program was not something she was involved in. Joy had her own mentor, but I wouldn't leave her alone. She was stuck with me for life. So, fortunately, she was very gracious about that and worked with me. Joy had her own mentor. She was working at Evergreen's Tacoma program with Dr. Maxine Mims, a fiercely brilliant and beautiful warrior woman who had created the Tacoma program to help working class people south of Seattle build upon their life and professional experiences to earn college degrees. Dr. Maxine's classes on the nature of community were rousing, challenging seminars that connected our perspectives to the issues of the day and the stories of our lives. Without pretense or fanfare, she and Dr. Joy skillfully guided us to share our life stories and consider them in the broader context of connecting with community. So these people, these individuals, these powerhouse role models poured into me as they did countless others throughout their lives and their careers. They turned and are still turning words into deeds. They guided my sense of self and identity in a way that made it clear I was part of something bigger, that I had a purpose, that I had a responsibility, that my gifts were not given to me simply to be utilized in any kind of selfish way. Um, and that there was joy and power in connectivity and in giving of oneself in a way that provided something of value to other people. That's what they all taught me, all of them. By giving me opportunities, by pushing me, by challenging me, by sometimes kicking my behind, as good mentors, role models, and teachers do. They stretch me way past all of my comfort zones. They help me wrestle with the tough issues that of the day, as well as the tough issues of trying to figure out how to process my identity and how to present it to the world in a way that reflected, pride in all of my ancestry, all of my ancestors, the incredible magical role that my mother, Rosalind, played as a parent and just as a human. And each of them, it was like, I'm just having a vision right now. I guess I was kind of like the baton in an amazing relay race. I went from, my mother to the Black Panther Party, to Larry Gossett, to Rhonda Oden Gossett, to Joy Hardiman, to Maxine Mins, and then today, I am deeply honored to be serving as author in residence for this wonderful program and working with the brilliant, charismatic, visionary Dr. Marcia Tatarunga, who I've known and admired since my days at the University of Washington. So this is a very poignant, powerful, and emotional full circle for me. But more than that, I'm sharing it as an example of the power of community, the power of people um, lifting each other up, pouring what they know and what they have into each other, so that the gifts that we're given, the skills that we acquire, the expertise we build along the way of our lives is more than just an impressive resume or CV or bio, um, or great stuff that comes up in a Google search. What it is that there's a human factor of a life impacting a life, right? That the purpose of your life is to impact another life. And and the other thing my journey shows, and that these people all taught me and continue to teach me, by the way, is the power in solutions. Starting with the Dixon brothers, who it turned out, I didn't know this at 13, were just a few years older than me. They were high school students and they were feeding hundreds of children. And they said, we need a medical clinic. And there was a medical clinic that I believe is still standing, the Carolyn Downs Medical Clinic. And they said, they taught us about sickle cell anemia and said, we need to test all the Black people for sickle cell anemia. And they did it. Okay, and these were teenagers. I'm emphasizing to you, I don't know what their resources were. I don't know who was the wind beneath their wings, but I was watching and it didn't seem unusual to me. So this was my sense of normalcy. And then again, a Larry Gossett who changed, I don't know how many lives, probably thousands and thousands of lives of kids like me who've never even considered college. I was the first person on either side of my family to graduate from college. And Rhonda, whose activism gave my writing its first public platform. And she also, by the way, coached me into becoming a journalist and writing for the University of Washington daily newspaper. She was, I looked to her for that kind of guidance and encouragement, and she generously provided it. And then, of course, Evergreen and all of that magic, and Dr. Joy and Dr. Maxine. And all of these folks, think of Maxine Mims, who comes to a place like Evergreen and says, I think we need a school for the working class, military veterans and working class folks, and starts it at her kitchen table, and look at it now. It's still here and it's growing and it's thriving. And they have there's an amazing building and there's lives still being changed. So the most powerful thing you can do is use your life in service to somehow try to impact and inspire other people. So my journey shows the power that community played, in my case, in helping a mixed race swirl girl to build a strong, healthy sense of identity and community. And I remember when I first met Dr. Joy, um, I wanted to write this book. I was 22 years old, maybe early 20s. I'd taken a few years off school. Um, and she listened and she nodded all sagely and wisely and everything with her big, gorgeous smile. And she said, yeah, girlfriend, but you ain't quite ready to write this book yet, but you will be one day. And what she said to me, and this was on my wall, the whole 5 years I worked on this book, is you need to tell the story of how a mixed girl, a colored girl, becomes a Black woman and honors her ancestors without compromise. So she gave me my thesis statement. And she's dropping pearls in the chat, y'all. Like this, she doesn't even play fair. Okay. I'm just saying, this is how she is. And then these pearls, like I walk around in my life and these thoughts bubble up. And I don't remember if they came from Elmer, Aaron, Larry, Rhonda, Joy Maxine. There's such a part of me they've seeped into my DNA, right? And so I'm honored anytime I'm able to teach, to speak, to write, to give, to share, to connect. I'm a communicator, so connecting is very important to me. And again, I want to just bring it all home. This is community. This is connecting dots. This is giving what you have in service of somehow giving someone else something that maybe can be of value to them on their journey. As we are all fellow travelers, and I've been blessed, so abundantly blessed. And each of these people is literally part of me, is part of my story, my book, my essence. And I'm proud and I'm honored and I'm so grateful to each of them, because I don't know who I would be if any single one of them had not taken me and guided me on my path. So I want to say thank you. And I want to say I love you. And if we have time, let's have some questions.
Indeed, we have time for questions. And thank you, TaRessa. What a beautiful presentation. Thank you for the chronology that you shared about your life. All right, let's check in the chat if there are any questions. And one thing that occurs to me as we begin to check, and I'll just start with this. As someone of mixed race, you said you learned to bring yourself into the room as a Black woman. And obviously you bring all of yourself into the room. Where, how do you navigate that? And what advice do you have for people who are biracial and really trying to navigate that, bringing their whole self into the room?
Great question. How do I navigate it? That's I spent 5 years writing a book to answer that question. But how I navigate it, and all the things I just shared are absolutely foundational to why I'm able to navigate it. Okay, to why I'm able to navigate it. But how I'm able to navigate it, I think, is because I've always had consciousness. And again, I'm going to go back to starting with Elmer and Aaron Dixon and their crew at the Panther House. I've always had people who helped me make sense of the world, of racism, of colorism, of light skin privilege, of being extremely racially ambiguous looking, which some mixed people are and some mixed people aren't. But many of us are, and that carries its own whole dynamic. And so my brother is here. Hi, Greg. So he's answering. So I should share his answer too, but because we have so many of the same influences. But before we get to Greg, who's coming to us from the Philippines, very honored to have you, bro. Basically, when people when we also were blessed, when I talked about the jazz baby community and growing up in the pre-gentrified Central District, we grew up in a Black context. Our neighborhood was mixed, but Blackness was the overarching theme, the through line. So there were we were us kids who were mixed, but we were all mixed Black. We all had Black dads. They all played music, you know. And then there were Black kids. I don't remember any white kids in the neighborhood. Greg has a much better memory for these things than I do, so he might. But and we interacted with at school with Asians and, you know, Latinos, Samoans, etc. So but that again, community, they fed us as we were growing up. We were never told you're not Black. I mean, we knew we were mixed, but we knew what we were. And I think the clarity, and I have to give a lot of credit to our mother. I really do. Again, she, you know, in the 20s and 30s when she was growing up, and in the 50s, 60s when we were growing up, in 70s, is really important for historical context. That she's Jewish, but Jews were not then yet societally considered white. That is very, very recent. And she grew up with Black people in North Minneapolis, right? And so the neighborhood we grew up in was similar to the neighborhood my parents grew up in together in North Minneapolis. Very similar, redlined, multicultural, multiracial, but very similar dynamics, right? So that was her comfort zone. That was what she was familiar with. And so she was never not comfortable with herself.
Okay, thank you. So this is about belonging and a sense of identity that was already there that you were born into, despite the fact that it was considered biracial. Culturally, there were some commonalities.
Yes, I want to share my brother's wisdom. He says and he's an international entrepreneur, by the way, among other things. And he's less, you know, hyper and stuff than me. So he says, I always tend to observe, orient myself, decide on the mode, to act upon it. Keeps me level and aware of the energy in the room. And that is how he operates, right? Like I just jump in and start waving my arms around and, you know, talking. Greg is an observer. He's a strategist. I've also learned a lot from him. He's 3 years younger than me. He also taught me how to swim when he was like 3, but he's super brilliant and a real observer of people. I'm a connector. He's real good at, you know, he can read a room in 10 seconds. And so he's also been one of my teachers, quite frankly. And because we had each other. And when you ask about advice, I'm working now to create advice that's entertaining for younger biracial mixed race people about strong identity. And this example that I shared here with you all today is really at the heart of it. It's embracing the truth of your ancestry, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't like all your strains of ancestry or all of your ancestors, you know, which is common among many groups. And to learn to navigate everything from the specificity of your ancestry to the cultural context you grow up in, to your appearance, because our appearances are very, 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 very dominant in how people interact with us, right? And understanding the politics. One of the things I find myself talking with a lot of younger mixed race people about, especially those who are also light-skinned and or ambiguous looking, each of those brings its own entire set of dynamics and mazes to navigate, is that this is what I look like, but I have to be aware of the political dynamics of moving through the world. And Dr. Maxine Mims, many years ago when I was in her class, said something to me that just shaped everything. And she said, when you're talking to a group of Black people and they're looking at you, they won't hear a word you say. She told me that, and I understood immediately what she meant. They were going to be so I'm one of those people, and I saw other people doing, and I learned how is, if I'm speaking in, you know, post COVID, a room full of people, and I'm gonna put a mic at a podium and they don't know anything about me, I will say, hello, I'm TaRessa, I'm Black and Jewish, I'm Black identified, like because otherwise they're like, who's the Puerto Rican, you know, just whatever. I mean, whatever, you know, seriously. And we've all been, when anybody's ambiguous looking, and we can take that over to gender presentation as well, up until the past 2 years when we now have language and we are honoring and acknowledging people beyond the binary, the gender binary, okay, You would look at somebody. My favorite, most favorite one was when I was commuting into New York for work on the subway, and this very flamboyant person was clearly gender non-conforming, fluid. I'm not sure which category they would say they were because we didn't have that language back then. But and attention getting, dressed and presenting in a way that you kept looking, but your brain was going, what are they? What are they? What are they? What are they? And people do that with racially and ethnically ambiguous people too. We do it to other ambiguous looking people. It's human nature. But there are political dynamics whenever you're in a racialized environment. And if part of your ancestry is Black and you're in an anti-Black, white supremacist, quote unquote, environment, then you have to be hyper aware. And sometimes it's exhausting to be hyper aware. It really is. Sometimes it's a distraction from you. We're just trying to be a person and get your work done or pay a bill or go to the grocery store. And people are walking up to you, hi, are you this? And you're just like, I'm sorry, I just want to pay the bill, but that's life. And so figuring out how to navigate all that, because there's many layers. And I think that there's more mixed race babies being born. Most mixed race people in the United States right now are under 18 years old. And there's a lot of work to do. So that's why I'm doing this work, to try to lay some groundwork.
So we're getting a few questions in the chat, and I would love to ask Bradley to just unmute and ask his question.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be here and be a part of this, and thank you for allowing me to step in to ask. I would imagine you have been in some privileged rooms, some of those rooms expecting you to pick a side, and being biracial. How do you navigate that and be true to yourself during moments like that?
Good question. So you mean privileged rooms? You mean around white people who don't know I'm not white?
I mean, privilege in the sense of race, class, gender, and so on and so forth.
I have been in a lot of privileged spaces, and not all white. I've been in Black privileged spaces as well. I haven't had many people try to force me to choose. And the reason is that I'm more articulate and eloquent about it now. But I've usually had ways throughout my life of letting people know that basically I'm Black. The meaning I am Black identified. I am politically, culturally Black, that's my context. I'm fully aware of all this. But if you really want to interact with me, you're going to find out very quickly that you're interacting with a Black person. And so I've never felt a sense of internal division. Does that work, Bradley?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely privileged rooms on the Black side too. Thank you for absolutely.
I've worked in some of them. Listen, yes, absolutely.
I asked that question because I've been in many classrooms where I was one of the only Black students, and I'm biracial as well. I got a master's in criminal justice, and in my program, I was the only Black male. I was the only Black person, period. But I'm biracial, and topics would come up, and I was, expected to lift all our voices, and I've carried that with me for a long time. And one of my great mentors is Dr. Joy Hardiman as well, who gave me my voice in the sense of, she told me whenever my heart is beating really fast and my leg is trembling, there's the ancestors that you need to answer to because they're in the room, so you better speak up, right? Wow. But I also have been in a place where I felt I was needed to denounce my mother, right, and family on that side, versus my father and my family on that side, so whom I both love immensely, and have felt the world in areas push me to like, hey, you gotta stand up for this, or you gotta stand up for that, and then you raise your voice in the ancestors, and then everybody just kind of freezes, and they're like, oh, I didn't expect you to say anything like that. Thank you, Dr. Joy Hardiman. We've dropped many mics together.
Well, you know, a thought about that is the, like you said, not wanting to speak against your mother, whatever, is to remember that you are the synthesis of different ancestral lines, and that one of the reasons, and this is my personal working definition of Blackness that I came to, I think in my 20s, was the realization that Blackness is inclusive. So your mother was included, my mother was included, we were included. Blackness in America, you know, things, you know, geography matters, culture matters, specificity matters. In the United States, Blackness has until recently, there are some challenges now, but has until recently been inherently inclusive because half white babies, you know, have been here since the whole 402 years. And so, is to think of yourself, how I think of myself, and I don't know if this works for you, political Blackness, systemic political, you are systemically politically Black, regardless of how you, what you know, what kind of music you like and who you date and all those kinds of things. You are politically and systemically Black. I am politically and systemically Black, meaning even if the world doesn't see me in a particular way, my reactions to the news of yesterday were that of a Black person, not of a half Black person. Okay, that it's not, you know, divided up and portioned out, right? And I'm a mother, and I have a son, and you know, all of that, and I have a brother, and so I've never not known that level of trauma, you know, and those things. So that when you do speak up, I want to encourage you to not feel like you're dividing, and not feel like you're overlooking any ancestor, living relative, or part of you or your family, because you would have been a slave. I would have been a slave, right? And so in the United States, that remains the defining measure, even though the, you know, that if it were to happen, if something were to happen tomorrow and they're divvying people up, you know, that kind of thing, that the political Blackness is something that is just a fact. And so one of the things when I talk to parents of mixed Black kids about, I said, well, you know, as a parent, you have to prepare your children to move Blackly, to know when to look through that lens, to always have that lens operating, right? I mean, yesterday was a great example, and tragically, we're probably going to have many more, right? Just like the young biracial man, you know, was in the latest list of names we're saying, and hashtags and prayers we're throwing up, and we're weeping and grieving and over, and that is feeding our collective trauma, so that you're part of something bigger than you. And you know, even when you're half white and half Black, you're not necessarily being torn apart. That you are synthesis. Nobody can divide you, right? Some people are going to try because they don't like what you represent. They don't like why we're here. They look at us and they think about what led to the conception, and it doesn't make them happy. And that, listen, that's a fact. I mean, there's lots of complicated facts here, but that's just real. And my thing is, if that's their thing, that's their thing. I'm not going to argue with them. I get it, understand it perfectly. But we have to move. We're here for a purpose. You're here for a purpose. I know since you're working with Dr. Joy, I don't have to worry about you, and you know, and with Dr. Tatarunga, but you will be inundated with that as I was. But when you get that, and when you see how it works when you're out in the world, I mean, Frederick Douglass was half white. Come on, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, again, you can't talk about Black America without talking about mixed Black people, and you can't talk about mixed Black people without talking about Black. We are inseparable. You cannot tear us apart. You just can't. Not on a foundational, historical, political level. I don't know if that helps.
It all helps. We love hearing your perspective, TaRessa. And it looks like Dr. Hardiman has a question, and I see another question in the chat. Dr. Hardiman?
Okay, I will try and make this. This is more of a statement. This is two really short TaRessa stories. TaRessa quotes me all the time, and I thank you. I thank you for acknowledging my contributions to your development and to your perfection. I thank you. But I also quote you a lot. And when I say to people, I say, "Oh, I have a friend, and her name is Teresa Stovall, and she was the first person who really gave me clarity about mixedness." I said I came from the East Coast, and we didn't have mixed people on the East Coast because everybody, if you were in a mixed relationship, the black family was raising you, so you was just a light-skinned kid in the black family. So there was no mixedness because it was black mamas raising, but then I came out on the West Coast, and then there were white women raising black kids, and it was a whole new phenomenon. Never seen it before. Didn't understand this mixedness stuff. So I saw Teresa, and she said she was mixed. And I said, "Oh, good. Let me ask her about what the species of people are." And she, I'm sorry, and I quote her all the time. She said, "Hi, my name is Teresa Stone. My mother's Jewish, and I am black." She just laid it out, bam, really clearly. "I love my mother. I recognize her. Don't you say one word about your mother, but I self-identify. In terms of my cultural preference, the places I feel most comfortable navigating in is black." But it wasn't, and so she was the most unconfused mixed person I had ever heard. And so I tell that story, and I talk about how she resisted being a twofer. And a twofer means that two for one. Because if you were trying to be a black person and be down and be all consciousness, you could go out with Teresa and you'd be dating a black woman, but she was light enough to look like a white woman, so she was a twofer. And that was a term for light skin trophy. That trophy, light skinned women were used as trophy people. And Teresa is absolutely correct. The first thing, they would pick her up and they would take her to dinner, and she would order fried chicken and watermelon on the first date forever, and sweet potato pie. Like, don't get it twisted. So I just wanted to share those two anecdotes about how she has navigated her way, that in no way denies her love of Rosalind, her mother, and her contribution of the culture, but totally defines what culture, what consciousness she chooses. She could have said, my father's black, and I am white. She could have said that, and I would have said, "Oh, okay, well, all right, fine." But that's not what So I just wanted to throw in those anecdotes about her, and because I reference her always, she is my model about how to be mixed and still be easy like Sunday morning. So I just wanted to throw out that. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Hardiman. I'm going to leave this last question to Angela Carlisle. Angela?
Hi, thank you, Dr. Runga. Hi, Teresa. So I graduated from Evergreen last year, about a year ago, and I'm getting ready to enter an MFA program in creative writing. And I've come to all of the virtual lecture series. I'm part of the team, so I'm always here, and I get to hear you speak all the time, and I'm so impressed by your confidence. And that is something I struggle with. I feel like I'll write something and I feel really great about it, but the moment I think anyone will read it, I just crumble and I just want to hide it. So I'm wondering, does that come with just experience? And I also want to say, when you talk about mentors, for me, I think about Dr. Runga as being that for me, because I always feel like when I'm in her presence, I can do anything. And she encourages me, to keep going. And I'm just like, yes, I've got this. But then again, when I'm alone and in front of other people, I truly retreat into myself and want to hide. So I would love any advice you have for me.
Okay, I'm going to address, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love it. Angela. Okay, I'm going to address this two ways. First of all, Dean Dr. Marcia Tate Arunga, again, who I've known for more years than either of us wants me to specify, but we were both very, very young, has always been a leader and a source of amazing inspiration, not just to me, but I believe to everybody who encounters her. So you are in wonderful, wonderful hands, especially when it comes to confidence. Quite frankly, I learned from her when it comes to confidence as well, and I always have. Now, guess what, Angela? You just described being a real writer. You write something and you're like, oh my God, this is like the most brilliant thing that has ever been written. And then, of course, you make the mistake of sharing it with somebody, but we'll get to that in a minute. But there's trusted people you can share it with. And then the next time you see it, you want to go jump off of a building. That just means you are like the rest of us writers. We are all like that. There are ways. So I share tips. You can hit me up. You've got all my contact info. I coach writers. You know, this is how you keep from what I call the bipolarity of being, it's completely normal. Being an introvert is completely normal. There are literally pro tips for all of this. And the confidence comes from in the stories I shared. I hope it came through. The confidence I have has come from, again, these communities, from being grounded. And so it's finding, nowadays we say find your tribe, right? Finding like-minded people and finding people who inspire you. I mean, Evergreen is a phenomenal environment for that. And you will then find that you're inspiring other people, and quite frankly, giving of yourself and sharing the blessings and the gifts you've been given is the best way to give confidence, is to get up out of yourself and reach out, is the best way to build confidence, because that confidence is rooted in purpose and not self. So you're a real writer. Welcome to the crazy. Hit me up anytime. I'm seeing so many, I'm getting ready to cry because I'm seeing, my God, Vicky, Alma, oh my Lord.
Do not cry. Just
I'm gonna
understand
cry.
how special you are. I want to thank everyone for coming, but we will close this portion and open for just the open floor. TaRessa has many friends here. And Bradley, wave Bradley in the corner, thank you. Bradley is now our recruitment lead at Evergreen Tacoma. We are looking for students. He will be here available to talk to anyone. So please, he'll be on the side, but we're going to continue. If you'd like to continue a give back to TaRessa or apparently share a story that won't be too embarrassing, but just a lovely moment. And also a big shout out to Bobby Fother from Portland, Oregon, a wonderful, prolific artist that goes way back. Many of the people that Rhonda have spoken about are here tonight. Larry Gossett, Rhonda Odom Gossett, Elmer Dixon, Maxine Mims, Joy Hardiman, Bobby Fother, all a part of her life during that time, and probably more than what I know. I've seen other faces from the Seattle community, and you're all welcome to just give a shout out or a give back, what we call give back to TaRessa, which is just letting her know what we have heard her say tonight that might have inspired us. So feel free. And if you raise your hand in the chat, or if you raise your hand in the symbols, or just raise your real hand, we'll be happy to let you speak. Yes, Carol. Unmute, Carol.
Mute. There we go.
There
Am I
you
unmuted?
Yes.
TaRessa, I love you. Hey, you know what? I first met you, I think, in the Work That Body. I don't know if people know about TaRessa's fabulous dancing.
Here comes the embarrassing story.
Yeah, dancing ability. And she turned me on to Prince like I've never been turned on to, because we used to do all these different lessons and so forth, and dance things to Prince, and today I was just coming up 23rd and looked over at your house, which is now painted yellow, bright, beautiful yellow with a white trim. I don't know who lives there, but I always, keep an eye on it and just think of the fond memories that we've shared. And you are missed in Seattle. You are missed by me. And anyway, I love you, and
Love
I'm
you.
proud
Miss
of
you. Call
you.
me.
Okay, we'll do.
Oh, awesome. All right. That's not Carol Colburn, right?
No,
Yes.
that's
Well, yes
way
and no.
that's way history. I'm Carol Crowder King now.
Yes.
Donald King is my husband,
Yes,
the
my
architect.
greetings to Donald, my
Yes,
friend Donald. Oh
yes,
my
Northwest
goodness.
African American Museum and all that good stuff. And
Beautiful. We have to
yeah,
have him, both of you. You're a nurse practitioner
right.
and Donald, the architect. Oh, we look forward to your coming to Evergreen, Tacoma.
Yes, and
Oh,
she
will do.
delivered Selma.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Mr.
yeah, that's right.
That's
That's
right.
right.
Oh my
Yes.
It
I
was
got a
her
whole bunch of babies
hands
out
that
there.
brought Selma into the world.
Yay.
Hello.
Well,
Thank
that
you.
really
Yeah.
reiterates the connection and the sense of community and belonging that TaRessa spoke of.
Larry, oh my
see
God,
Elmer
Rhonda.
Dixon.
Rhonda, put your face on the camera, girl.
Elmer Dixon is going to speak next, and then we'll
Oh.
go to Larry and Rhonda Gossett.
Okay.
Elmer.
Where's Elmer?
Is he?
His hand was up, but
Is his mic on?
anyways, we'll
He's
go
driving.
over to Larry and Rhonda, and
All
we'll
right.
get back to Elmer.
I was just trying to unmute my phone.
Oh, there he is.
Hold on, Larry. Don't be trying to take my spot.
No, you know I would never do that, brother.
This is history in the making.
So, hey,
my
TaRessa and Miss Marcia and Joy and all of the good people here. I just had a kind of a question statement. My maternal grandmother was born in Mississippi around 1899, 1900. And her dad was a who she never knew, was a white guy from Europe, and so she was very light complected, and in the 1930s she passed for white because she had to in order to feed the family during the Great Depression. She married my grandfather, who was a very dark complected Black man. And she never talked about or appeared to have any confusion about who she was and what she was. She knew she was a Black woman. And I'm just wondering, because maybe, I know she grew up in Mississippi, and whether or not this, I don't know if it's a confusion. I think it's this outward need to express identity or to discover identity, and maybe it is some confusion. If that's a generational thing, do you think, TaRessa, or is it a regional thing? Because it was pretty common in the South for high yellow Black folks to live among the other Black folks. It was pretty common. It was a commonplace thing, and they were accepted in the community just like anybody else. They just happened to be light, bright, and damn near white.
Yes, exactly. Hey, Elmer, I hope you're driving safely. Okay, so yes, great question. Real quick context. So historically, you know, up until just a few years ago, relatively speaking, the United States of America was defined strictly on the Black-white binary. Strictly on the Black-white binary, right? As environments become more racially and ethnically diverse and internationally diverse, that gets subverted a little bit. So what Elmer's talking about, of course, was very common, both in terms of her doing what we called like a practical passing. She wasn't denying herself or her people, but she had to go make money, and then she'd come back and bring it back to her family and the community. And that, yes, and when I was growing up, and Greg and I were growing up as well, we generally were accepted as Black. I mean, you're considered Black, as Larry Gossett. You're Black, TaRessa, you know. But and your money, the money at the UW is Black. There is no mulatto money. You remember that, Larry? Anyway, it's in the book. But what's happening now is that for the first time in US history, and this is literally just a few years old, y'all, just a few years old, starting probably with the presidency of Barack Obama, the 2000 census category, some other race, which I'm not fond of and I don't use, but you know, the first kind of looking to recognize, and more mixed race people in public spaces speaking out about being mixed and not being everything. They say, well, yeah, but you know, you're Black. Okay. So now there's Meghan Markle, and now there's Kamala Harris, and now there's Naomi Osaka, and now there's more and more mixed Black people of different types who are just like, yeah, I'm mixed, here's the deal. But that's brand new. Kamala Harris was really the first huge celebrity power person to do that, and she just did that a few months ago. To just, I am honoring the Black, I am honoring the Jamaican, I am honoring the South Indian. And she looked around like, and you got Ann Howard, aka Oakland Tim's, Chucks. Is there anything else I need to say to y'all? Like she handled all that, right? So, but that's new. So for people like me, like I never felt represented by President Obama as a mixed race person. I feel represented by her at 66 years old for the first time. So what's new and different real quickly is that they're just like with gender, sexuality, and all aspects, our brilliant young millennials and centennials are pushing us out of our binaries, pushing us out of our comfort zones and the places where we could just languish and you know, not grow. And they're helping to really push all kinds of identity. And so mixed race is in there, and it's very complicated. It's gorgeously chaotic and complicated. I'm right in the middle of it. You know, no place I'd rather be. It's part of my destiny and purpose in this life, and I feel well prepared for it for all the reasons I shared in my story. But it's not as simple as it used to be. And it's not, there's no consensus. We can't even agree on terminology, on definitions, but we're in there wrestling with it. Okay, and it's really the first time. And it's also what's different about it. There's the first time there's an ongoing public conversation about it, and 99% of that conversation is digital, and it's happening on social media. And if you don't know about Black Twitter, Google it. Black Twitter basically runs the world. No joke. So, you know, you guys, what did Black Twitter say? Right? Da 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 da. But this is really happening on social media, and it's happening in real time, and it's very fast and furious. And I'm just honored that the young folks let me hang out in these spaces. And I tell them, I am learning from you. I am listening. And then sometimes I go into auntie mode and I bring history and context because they don't have that. But there's a lot that's different. There's a lot that's different. And at the same time, we're still in an anti-Black, white supremacist system that hasn't changed in the century since it was created, right? So there's all of that incredible tension and synthesis, but I am invigorated by the vision because of the people who raised me up, who I shared with you, who were visionaries, but who most importantly were and are doers. Okay, each and every one of them, that my brain, they made my brain think in a way that, well, we'll just do something about this. So I'm working in different, when I say I'm an identity equity advocate, I'm working with some very brilliant colleagues, and I'll keep you all posted on the platforms and the different things that we're building to address these issues. Very exciting stuff.
Thank you, TaRessa. I see Bobby Fother. Oh, and then sorry, Larry. Larry, can I go to
and
you?
Rhonda? I see Rhonda's eyebrow.
Since they are our elders, allow me, well,
All right.
all my elders, but allow me to call on Larry and Rhonda and then Bobby. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marsha, and I hope that everyone can hear me. And my story is, on the lighter side. When I met TaRessa when she was about 17, 18, still in high school, and then TJ Vassar and I, when she was about 19, I believe, hired her to be the secretary for the Central Area School Council. I got I got elected to the Central Area School Council, part of the process of decentralizing control of schools here in Seattle. So we were supposed to be running all the schools in the central area, but we didn't have that much control. But TaRessa was our secretary, and TJ used to tell me that all kinds of brothers would come into the Central School Council office and start, rapping on her. He didn't know if it's because she's light skinned or what, but they'd be rapping. And he said he loved the way she dealt with them. And then he's kind of nosy, so he'd ask her, do any of these brothers have any game? And she said, most of them can't rap that well, bro, but some of them are nice. So I just wanted to ask her, did she ever go out with any of the cats to try to talk to her when she worked for the Central Area School Council?
Oh my God, talk about embarrassing stories. I plead the fifth. No.
Okay.
First of all, rest in heaven to the amazing Tommy T.J. Vassar. Probably went out with a couple, but I don't think anything serious came of it.
Yeah,
So funny.
All right.
Well, I was way, y'all. I'm gonna give you a visual. I'm 17, 18, 19, rocking the extreme mini and the platform shoes. Thank you very much. I'm just saying.
Yeah. You look good.
So, TaRessa, this is me, Rhonda
Hey, baby.
Odin Gossett, and I
Dr. Odin Gossett.
Oh, I hope. No, I remember you long ago, so bubbly, and came into the daily office and signed on to be a reporter. And I'm so proud of you writing all these books now. Thank you. And teaching people as a professor. Really appreciate you.
You were the first person to publish me, sweetheart.
I know.
In the world.
One day. But no, I really appreciate how you've just grown and you continue to share and teach. And I love your family. And I remember your mom, she's a dear friend of mine as well. And so
my mother would not eat anybody else's sweet potato pie, y'all.
Yeah, TaRessa and her mom used to make me make those sweet potato pies. But anyway, you were just a prolific writer. And I'm so proud of you. Now personal story, TaRessa gave me my wedding shower.
Yes.
Enjoy our baby shower. And Selma and Langston were born with, oh my goodness, almost the same day. But anyway, we all had good times.
Who was the nurse?
Carol Coburn.
Really?
Are we going to talk about how I made you name your oldest son's middle name after Aaron Dixon?
You named Malcolm Aaron.
That's right. You did do that.
Malcolm Aaron Gossett. And I love you guys. I miss you all, and continue to be the brilliant women that you are. Thank you.
As are you, my sweet. Thank you all so much. Oh my God, this is amazing.
That's so awesome. And this is really a conversation. I just want to point out what Larry and Elmer were raising is about colorism and the attempt of generation after generation to lighten Black skin. That was actually intentional for many years. And also not necessarily born out of unions that were as respectable as what TaRessa's alluding in her family, but there in the enslavement era, this was a rampant behavior and cultural pattern where the mixing of race even led to the fetching of different prices at the auction block, in the sale of people. Yeah. So this is grounded now in American history. We got to be really clear where this comes from. And there was a need or a desire to have a better life for the next generation. And somehow that became synonymous with the whitening or at least the lightening of Black skin. So this is such an important discussion. It's the first time that I've actually heard it. And I have to tell you, just a quick advertisement, tomorrow, the King County Library is sponsoring a talk, which I'm moderating with Britt Bennett, who is the author of The Vanishing Half. Another story about colorism, and that's another very important talk to go to. But right now, I just want to give all kudos and much respect for Teresa Stovall's presentation. What light you have brought. And we're going to close this out with Bobby. Yes, because we know
Bobby,
that
oh my God.
we know you're all the way, you traveled all the way from Portland, Oregon. Unless we have anyone who's traveled from farther, we're gonna let you
brother,
close this out.
Philippines.
Oh, your brother.
Yeah, I'm serious. He's
All
up there.
Yes.
being here. Yes, Greg. Okay, Bobby, go ahead.
Well, as you know, as a joyism that I have is if you live in the Northwest, you live in a whole corridor. So I'm not that far away. I'm just in the suburbs, okay? But Teresa, hi. How are you? Number one. Number two, it's so good to see you. And I wish I had time before this to call my sister so she could have been online. So we need to be in contact. I want to make sure I say that right here and now. It's easy. You can always, Marsha and Joy know where I am. My story. My sister and I went to the first Black Arts Festival in Atlanta.
Oh my God.
Okay. And thank you, Teresa, for acclimating us to the Atlantean style of things. Okay. Because we were so from the Northwest, the people on the airplane in front of us stood up in their seats, turned around and said, "Where y'all from?" Because they just couldn't believe our conversations behind them. So, but I do want to make sure that we make contact because I'm doing some art pieces about culture bearing and how we, Marsha, Joy, several people on this line right now, you have been trained from childhood to be those culture bearers who get to speak the way we do now. So I just want to make sure that we carry that familial piece, and I'm trying to define it as well. So we'll be tapping brains for that kind of information. But it's so good to see you, and I'm like shocked. This is like, it is a family reunion.
It's such a family reunion. Speaking of which, do we have time for my brother, Greg?
Yes.
Gregory.
Yeah, of
Gregory.
Of course.
Unmute yourself, boo. He's like, I don't want to. Okay, here we go.
I'm not really sure what you guys want me to say.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hi.
Reach your sister for all we care. Glad to see you.
Hello, Gossett. I haven't seen
Hi.
you.
Hi.
I think the last time I saw you was during one of my life meltdowns. And I got to say, you helped me at that point to also kind of get out of the rut that I had jumped into.
Yeah, I remember.
Everything turned out fine. I ended up after that getting some good jobs and ended up moving overseas for a few years, and I never left. So living out here now, I think what I'm getting from all this, and I think I'm going to give some perspective. My sister and I are like this growing up. It was always Greg and Terry. Yeah,
y'all was close.
So we were inseparable in some people's mind, and then others didn't even know the other half of the duo. But I learned very young, again, we both grew up in that interracial neighborhood, and the way it was set up in the central area was up the hill from us was the white St. Joseph's church group, that whole upper middle class went down the hill from us. It went down economically, and as you went south, it got more black, and as you went north, it got more white. And kind of in the middle, there was a bunch of Asians, Chinese and Japanese and Filipinos. So I tended to smoothly move throughout all of the different cultural groups, trying to get a feel for what was expected from my racial identity from each of those groups. Mm-hmm. And what I started to notice was that certain groups, Filipinos versus the Japanese or so on and so forth, you could tend to fit in better without doing any censoring of how you're acting, saying, talking, moving, whatever you're doing. And other groups, they really were trying to figure out ethnically what you were. And they're not white or black. So they didn't have the same context. So real young, I learned how to maneuver through the different cultures and saying, okay, Japanese people, I go to their house, I eat with pointy chopsticks, I take my shoes off outside. Chinese people, I eat with square chopsticks, I take my shoes off outside the door and put them on a rack. Filipino families, I didn't have to take the shoes off to go in the house. So you start to understand the cultural dilemmas that they deal with that aren't the black, white thing. So as I started to go out into the world and got lucky and ended up internationally doing things, all the things that were a negative in the States racially turned out to be a positive once I got out of the United States. See, and that's not, they didn't ever tell us that. They never told us that being ambiguous or being neutralized in people's minds racially can become a great advantage to us. And I've had brothers that have moved out here over the years, been super successful in America and retired out here. And what they find out when they get here and what I tell them is Filipinos see all of us as one thing, non-Filipinos. We're all blonde. We're all blonde hair, blue eyed, all people. Doesn't matter if you're black, white, whatever, you're a foreigner. So I think being mixed gave me an ability to look at other people's perspectives in how they saw me without me trying to craft myself to their idea of my identity. And I am fluid racially. I'm black, I'm a black man. You know, I've experienced the things that black men experience, including prison and the system and how it tries to beat your brain out and make you all these different things. But the reality of it is we create our identity internally. It's internal engineering. And what TaRessa taught me is you can be black and not let any of your ancestral genetic memories be denied or neglected, because all of them are there. I actually have my ancestors. I have one of the club of ancestors that is live with me from our Native American side. TaRessa doesn't express that the same way, but she didn't have the same experience as I did. My father told me when I was real young, 12 years old, he held up a beer bottle. He said, don't ever bring home anything darker than this. Okay, and that caught me off guard because I didn't understand what he really meant by that. So I pushed him and I said, what do you mean? He said, there's two things I don't ever want you to do. I married your mother to give you an advantage. I married your mother so you don't have to experience what I experienced. So yes, you're a black man. Do not ever tell anyone that you're not. And do not ever tell anyone that you're an Indian. He said, if you have to choose, I gave you the choice of being Jewish and black. And you can use those. But the Indian, don't ever tell anybody. Indians are drunks, they're useless, you'll never get a job, you'll never get hired. So now I had a third dynamic that my sister didn't get hit over the head with. Okay? And so my ancestors, my Native ancestors, told me to tell you, TaRessa, the bottom line is all of our ancestors are tribal. All of them have almost been wiped off the face of the earth.
Wow.
White man. He's not going to change.
Minneapolis.
And now is the time. I'm watching America from afar, you guys. You're falling down. It's scary. Now is the time to stand up. Now is the time that they're on their knees. Globally, they're losing. And I'm sitting out here in a third person watching it and going, time is coming. It got real close under this Trump shit. But y'all need to understand that being black now is probably one of the stronger positions you can be in moving forward, because guess what, folks? The world is not white. They're shrinking. You know, and I work in the Middle East, I work in North Africa, I work all through Asia. We can go anywhere and we're accepted. Once we get out of America, make it ours again. Because it used to be long ago, we used to have a voice. They took all that shit away. Okay, so that's me, that's it. Love you guys.
Can you show them your tattoo? With the 3 feathers?
Yes, one for each race. When I was in prison, I was part of the Native American circle because that's where I got my strength in there. I was on McNeil Island. And the pipe carrier from the tribe, he gave me the name 3 Feathers because he said that in the lodge, when they were sweating, he could see my ancestors, all three of them, sitting there in a Jewish shawl with the hat, with the feathers, and with the animal teeth and the skins. He said, all your ancestors are here with you. Don't deny us. You're strong. You will rise above this. See, the prison was trying to make me think I was a loser, okay? I came out of there, rebuilt, became an executive with Coca-Cola, British American Tobacco, lots of your multinationals out here because they need our way of thinking. So I'm gonna stop. I could keep going, but yeah, this is a great group. My sister is definitely my lead on all this. And for those of you I haven't seen in a long time, good to see you. And Rhonda, I had a crush on you. Nobody ever knew that. I just said that.
Well done, Greg. Well done. Thank you for sharing. Rich sharing.
Told y'all he was
It's been an
brilliant.
amazing evening. We technically shut down at 8 o'clock sharp, but because of the richness of tonight, we went on to 30 extra minutes. We're so happy that this was rich. I hope it was as rich for you as it was for me. And TaRessa, thank you. Much respect.
Oh my
Much
God,
respect.
thank you all so much. This is like the best. Let's do this again. Family reunion. Okay, I'll
Indeed.
hit you all up. Yes, Facebook. Seriously, and my brother. Oh my God, so
And
honored.
don't
So
forget, next
honored.
Wednesday night, we will have Larry Gossett featured at our virtual lecture series. So it only gets better from here. We hope to see you 7 o'clock on next Wednesday, April 28th. Thank you very much. Peace.
Please come
Great
from Larry.
job, Marcia. Great job.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Bobby.
Kathy, can you hit me up, man?